Hi! I'm going to review this show in two ways. One, as a Star Trek series, as in how it works in relation to the other Star Trek shows, and two, as a standalone sci-fi, how it works as a self-contained sci-fi unrelated to anything else. The reason for this is as follows. As a longtime Star Trek fan, this series makes no sense and kind of pisses me and a lot of other people off. But as a standalone sci-fi, as in if this was the first Star Trek ever made, or an unrelated to Star Trek entirely, I could actually really get on board with this show. It kind of hooked me towards the end, but then I kept remembering that it's meant to be a Star Trek edition, and then I got all mad again. So I'm conflicted. So I will give my scores out of 6 as usual. Then if you want to stick around to see how I came to this conclusion and how I think this show could improve, then please do. Otherwise, you can just get out. As a Star Trek series, I'm gonna give this show 3 out of 6 sad Spock faces. Aww. As a standalone sci-fi, I'm gonna give this show 5 out of 6 tardigrades. Yeah! Here's why. Also, this review will contain some light spoilers for the first episode of Star Trek Discovery only, but other than that, it will be totally spoiler-free. So here's why I don't think STD works as a Star Trek series. And no, it's not because it's just social justice warrior garbage and I'm a white straight man. I like my skirts short and my women in the kitchen. Shut up. Just because a show has a woman at the forefront or a black dude or a gay character doesn't mean it's a social justice warrior epic. We have women leaders in the real world, we have black leaders in the real world, and guess what? Gay people exist too. Deal with it. Also, can we not forget that Star Trek has always been about social commentary and social justice? That's like the fucking core message of the show. Also, we had black leaders in the other series and female captains and strong female leads. Shit, even the original series, with all its flaws, had the first interracial kiss on TV. Star Trek has always been, or tried to be, progressive. And if you don't like that element of it, then you don't really like Star Trek. Goodbye. No, STD doesn't work as a Star Trek series, not because of its diverse cast, but because it doesn't have that Star Trek aesthetic. Stylistically, it's way off. It doesn't look or feel like a Star Trek series, from its atmospheres to its dialogue and so on. And also, this is not because it's about war, baby, and Roddenberry was all about peace and shit. I mean, Deep Space Nine was all about war, Voyager was kinda too, and Enterprise, and all the movies were kinda war-based. And yes, I know most of this came out post Roddenberry's death, but still, Star Trek has always had a ton of war in it. STD fails, however, because of how it reflects war, or reflects upon it, and how it displays it. Everything is dark and gritty. There's no witticisms, there's very little humor, there's no consequence nor message behind the violence. It's just action in space, with dim lights and zero social commentary. To this point, in fact, I would say there's even less social commentary and less social justice than the other Star Trek series. So again, I'm not really sure why people are getting this SJW criticism from. Just because there's a gay guy or something? Like, Star Trek Discovery lacks social commentary, it lacks political commentary, it lacks any kind of relatability and reflection that the other Star Trek series had. And all this would be totally fine if the show was not Star Trek. We watch Star Trek not just for the awesome space adventures, but for its message of bettering oneself, its message of equality, its message of peace and social justice. Star Trek Discovery has very little of this. Another reason why STD doesn't work as a Star Trek series is that it's a fucking prequel. If you know anything about me, you know I hate prequels, and this one is particularly bad. Here's why. Everything we see here doesn't matter. We've never heard of these characters before, we know the Federation prevails, and in due time, Klingons will even join Starfleet. We know the spore drive is not going to exist, and all scientific breakthroughs are going to be lost because none of it appears in future events. Therefore, anything that happens in this show is absolutely meaningless and pointless, unless they take the show in some super weird direction like the other side of the galaxy or another universe and perhaps never return, but they didn't. I guess that's a bit of a spoiler there. However, if you set this series after the events in Voyager, like set it however many years later since the last episode of Voyager, change the Klingon to any other race, maybe even a new race or a race that was mentioned a few times before but we've never seen or rarely seen, then kept everything else exactly the same, holy smokes, I'd give this show another sad Spock face. I mean, it still wouldn't have that feel of Star Trek, but it wouldn't be as inconsequential as it is now. Sorry, Star Trek Discovery, but you ain't no Star Trek of mine. But, as a standalone sci-fi, now don't get mad, it's fucking sick. I'm hooked with the characters, the crazy story, the adventures, the effects, the action, all of it. I love action sci-fi as much as any other sci-fi, and this show has a lot of it, and it's pretty gory as well. It's part action, part thriller, part horror, and all sci-fi. It's just not Star Trek, but the cast are great, the enemies are scary, the battles are spectacular, the ships are cool, the techno-babble is fun, the pacing is good, the suspense is fantastic, and the overall aesthetic is creepy, and I like it. It doesn't have that Star Trek aesthetic, but it's still good. The twists and turns are also very fun. So like I said, if this were its own show, unrelated to Star Trek, I would totally be on board with it. Sometimes when watching, I get right into the story, and then I have to remember that it's meant to be Star Trek, and it kind of ruins the story for me. The problem is that these days people are afraid to make something new because everyone is such a harsh critic and expects the world. People are too hard to please, and studio executives care more about numbers at the bottom of a spreadsheet more than quality or fresh entertainment. I mean, it does happen from time to time, such as Westworld or Altered Carbon, but again, it's not original per se, as they were based on previous works. So in STD, if you change the ship design a little bit, called the Federation the Alliance or something, called the Klingons the Blingons and the Warp Drive to Phase Drive or something, then bam, you could keep everything else in Star Trek Discovery the same, and you would have a brand new, original, and awesome sci-fi. Slapping the Star Trek name on there has ruined this series for a lot of people, which is a bummer because it's actually pretty kick-ass, man. It's not Star Trek, but I like it, but I don't like it. You get what I mean? How do you guys feel about Star Trek Discovery? Leave a comment if you care to, and then maybe check out my new podcast, True Story Bro, hosted by Reflux Radio. Here, every Tuesday, I will tell a colourful story accompanied by music and sound. It's usually a travel adventure, but not always. Check that out if you want. Or don't. Just do whatever makes you happy, baby.